Galaxy-Eyes is decent at playing through multiple negates. Certain playstyles that include floodgates, specifically Backrow heavy decks like Labyrinth, Galaxy-Eyes tends to struggle with. To address this problem, I want to suggest some staple cards, some board breakers to be specific. I do want you to take into consideration that this is specifically for Galaxy-Eyes. This means if a card prevents you from using Trance, I will not be talking about it, as anything that prevents you from using Trance, I don't see worth running. I'll break this down into 3 categories. These are cards that board break against monster cards, spell/trap cards, and finally cards that can do both at the same time. Please note that I will not be mentioning any of the cards that can do both in any of the previous categories. The purpose of control cards is usually to trade 1 for a negation, which will prevent them from negating powerful cards that you hold. Another nice thing about these control cards is that they do not summon to your side of the field, meaning you can actually use Trance on your turn as well. A downside to this type of board breaker is that you have to target a card, and some cards cannot be targeted, or some effects do not allow you to target other cards. More downsides is that it's only able to remove 1 card, and it doesn't necessarily get rid of floodgates, because floodgates affect both players regardless of who's in possession of the floodgate. Unlike control cards, monster removal cards remove the card entirely from the field. This is really good for monster floodgate cards, as Galaxy-Eyes is severely weak to cards like this, but monster removal cards do have their own problems. Unfortunately, monster removal cards tend to destroy the card and send it to the graveyard. This means that they can trigger graveyard effects, or they may be immune to destruction effects, rendering your monster removal card useless. There are exceptions to this, such as Nibiru, which tributes their card, but cards like Raigeki and Dark Hole do destroy cards. When it comes down to whether I would use control or removal for Galaxy-Eyes, I tend to lean towards removal instead. Galaxy-Eyes is fairly decent at playing through negations, but it's absolutely terrible against monster floodgate cards. Removing these cards can be extremely useful to winning the duel. Another form of board breaking is turning your opponent's cards face down. Similar to monster removal, this also forces negations, as your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters which are face down. It also has the benefit of removing continuous monster effects, which include floodgate effects. Both Eclipse and Luna are multi-target, as well as Swords of Concealing Light. Book of Moon is also another option you can have. Both Moon and Luna target, whereas Eclipse doesn't target but can be negated by Ash. My advice is to use Book of Eclipse more. Unless you are using Jumper within your deck, then I would suggest Luna for that discard effect. The downside to putting your opponent's monsters face down is that you can't deal damage to your opponent. Bear in mind you're going to have to destroy those cards via attacking, and this can be done by C62, but you may trigger some graveyard effects as well. Fortunately, if you are unable to OTK your opponent, you can at least summon Zeus during main phase 2 to prevent your opponent from playing the game as well. And lastly, we have the negation section. This comprises of pretty much only 2 cards which I can talk about individually, which is Droplet and Dark Ruler No More. Similar to any discard effect, I would only recommend running Droplet once Jumper comes out. On the other hand, you can use Dark Ruler No More, and although it prevents you from OTKing your opponent, you can just play as if you're going first. Bear in mind the board breakers I've mentioned so far only affect monster cards, so they all have the same weakness of being weak to Backrow heavy decks. Backrow removal is split up into 2 parts, destructive and non-destructive. As the name implies, destructive Backrow removal actually destroys the card. Cards like Harpy's Feather Duster, MST, Twin Twister all destroy your opponent's Backrow. The problem with this is that there are many cards that protect Backrow from being destroyed. This is where it's handy to use non-destructive Backrow removal, such as Cosmic Cyclone and Hey Trunade. Unfortunately, Trunade isn't effective against continuous spell or trap cards. This means floodgates are still a problem under protection. Regardless, the best form of Backrow removal is going to be Cosmic Cyclone, but the downside to Cosmic Cyclone is that it's single target. Before I start discussing what cards you should run, I want to talk about the hybrid cards, the cards that can both remove monster cards as well as spell and trap cards. There are 2 main cards I want to discuss within this category, and that's Evenly Match and Lightning Storm. Lightning Storm has all the strength and weaknesses of a monster removal card, as well as a destructive Backrow removal card, but it provides a solution to 2 different situations that can occur at any given point. A lot of decks tend to run floodgates which do not hinder their own deck. Even Galaxy-Eyes can do this. This means a deck can have a decent amount of Backrow as well as a decent amount of monsters on the field. Lightning Storm gives you that option to choose which one is the most threatening within that situation, and is a key strength in why it's main decked within Galaxy-Eyes. There's also Evenly Match, arguably the best card for Galaxy-Eyes, as it doesn't trigger graveyard effects, it doesn't destroy or target, and it has the potential to remove both your opponent's monster cards as well as spell cards, forcing them to choose only one card to control. To know what cards to use, there are two different situations that you're always going to have to evaluate. This is going to be for main decking cards and siding cards. Main decking card is going to be format dependent and what the meta is. Side decking cards is going to be matchup dependent and it's going to be used once you know the playstyle of your opponent's deck. For the cards that you should main deck, I'm going to recommend Evenly Match and Cosmic Cyclone. This is because this format is quite diverse and Evenly Match covers everything. On the other hand, if the format favored one particular playstyle, let's say Backrow, I would probably swap out two of my Evenly Matches for one copy of Harpies and one copy of Lightning Storm. The reason why I chose Cosmic Cyclone is to bypass the effects which may protect Floodgates. Once again, I have to emphasize that Galaxy-Eyes is really weak to Floodgates, so single target removal is perfectly fine. When choosing what cards you should side into your main deck, if you're up against a combo deck, then I'm going to encourage you to replace your Evenly Matches for Dark Ruler No More. This is because Dark Ruler No More can't be responded to by monster effects, and if your opponent has multiple Omni Negates via monster effects, then preferably you're going to want to run Dark Ruler No More. You can also replace the Cosmic Cyclones or any Backrow removal with Nibiru to prevent your opponent from even reaching to a point where they're able to set up multiple negates via monster effects. Bear in mind, Nibiru is format dependent because there may be some decks that might be able to bypass it. Because of this, you may want to consider reintroducing Evenly Match, or instead use Forbidden Droplet, although I still recommend only using Forbidden Droplet once Jumper comes out. If the deck you're up against is Backrow heavy, then I'm gonna recommend Hey Trunade instead of Evenly Match. This is to counter people who set 5 and pass turn. Bear in mind that Trunade doesn't work against face-up continuous spell or trap cards, so I would also recommend pairing this with Cosmic Cyclone, Harpy's Feather Duster, and Twin Twister. Note that in this case, Harpy's Feather Duster and Twin Twister are mainly going to be used for face-up cards. The most common type of protection that Backrow decks are using is Heavenly Prison, which only protects set cards. This means you can use Hey Trunade to counter it, forcing them to activate and then pop the cards with Twin Twister or Harpy's Feather Duster. There are some decks that are in between. Take for example Trap Trick, which has many monsters to worry about as well as many Backrow to worry about. In this case, you want to run cards like Evenly Match and Lightning Storm to help you with both situations. Evenly Match is especially good against Trap Trick because it removes monster via game mechanics, meaning it doesn't matter that they're unaffected by trap effects. So tell me what board breakers you use, and do you agree or disagree with the cards I mentioned? A little Easter egg here. I just want to say that I'm extremely grateful we're nearly at 1,000 subscribers, and I just want to thank everyone who subscribed and who watches my videos. It really means a lot to me. And if you haven't subscribed, I hope I'm able to convince you.